There are songs you have heard 1,000 times. Songs that played in the background of your life so consistently that you stopped listening to the words years ago. They became wallpaper. Familiar, comfortable, safe. But some of those songs were never what you thought they were. Some of them were written in fury. Some in grief. Some were misread so completely that the people who wrote them spent decades trying to correct the record. And failed. And one of them became the anthem of a political movement that the man who wrote it despised with every fiber of his being. Here are 12 rock songs from the 1980s that nobody understood. Until now. Number 12, Take My Breath Away, Berlin, 1986. Most people hear this song and think romance, a slow, aching synthesizer. Terry Nunn's voice rising through the verses like something being remembered rather than experienced. The kind of song that plays at the end of a night when nobody wants to leave. But Take My Breath Away was written for a film about death. Top Gun is not a love story. It is a film about young men trained to kill, about the psychological cost of that training, about what happens when someone who lives entirely in the present tense suddenly loses someone permanent. Maverick doesn't fall apart over Kelly McGillis. He falls apart over Goose, over the moment he couldn't prevent, over the empty seat in the cockpit. Take My Breath Away plays across the film's romantic scenes, so audiences attached it to the love story. But composer Giorgio Moroder built it around something heavier. That suspended, hovering quality in the production, the way it never quite resolves, never fully lands, was deliberate. It was meant to sound like suspension, like the moment before something changes forever. The song won the Academy Award for Best Original Song in 1987. Berlin's lead singer, Terry Nunn, has spoken in interviews about how the band almost didn't record it. They felt it was too slow, too soft for their sound. They recorded it anyway. And the song that almost wasn't became the one thing most people remember Berlin for. Sometimes the thing you almost walk away from is the only thing that lasts. Number 11, Don't You Want Me, Human League, 1981. Philip Oakey didn't want this song on the album. He thought it was too commercial, too lightweight, too far from what he believed Human League were capable of. He fought against its release as a single. When the label overruled him, he made a prediction. It would reach number 1, burn out immediately, and damage everything they had built. He was half right. Don't You Want Me reached number 1 in the United Kingdom. It stayed there for 5 weeks. It became the Christmas number 1 of 1981, the biggest commercial prize in British music at that time. In the United States, it topped the Billboard Hot 100. It sold over 1 million copies in the UK alone. But here's what Oakey never discussed publicly at the time. The song is not a love song. It is a control song. The narrator isn't heartbroken. He's furious. He found this woman working as a waitress. He made her what she is. He elevated her. And now she thinks she can leave. The male vocal is not romantic. It is threatening. Susan Ann Sully, who sang the female response vocal, was 17 years old when she recorded it. She had been discovered by Oakey in a Sheffield nightclub 2 weeks earlier. She had never recorded professionally before. She walked into the studio, recorded her vocal, and delivered the perfect counterpoint to Oakey's barely contained menace. Warmth against cold. Freedom against possession. The tension between those two voices is the entire song. Most people spent 1981 singing along to it at Christmas parties without realizing they were listening to a power struggle. Number 10, Running Up That Hill, Kate Bush, 1985. Kate Bush wanted to swap souls with someone she loved, not metaphorically. The song is built around a specific theological idea, that if a man and a woman could exchange experiences completely, inhabit each other's pain and fear and history entirely, They would understand each other in a way that ordinary love never allows. She called it Running Up That Hill, originally with a subtitle, A Deal with God. The record label removed the subtitle before release. They were nervous about the commercial implications of referencing God directly in a song title. Several radio stations in certain markets, they warned, would refuse to play it. Bush was furious. The subtitle was not decoration. It was the entire point. The deal she was describing wasn't romantic. It was spiritual. A bargain with something larger than either person. A request for a kind of understanding that human beings are not normally built to give each other. Running Up That Hill reached number 3 in the UK. It became Bush's highest charting single in the United States at that time. Then, in 2022, 37 years after its release, a television program called Stranger Things used it in a scene. A teenager running, something pursuing her. The song perfectly soundtracking a different kind of desperate bargain. It returned to number 1 in the United Kingdom, number 4 in the United States. Bush became the first female artist to have a song simultaneously top both the UK singles and albums chart. She had spent 37 years trying to explain what the song was really about. One scene, 4 minutes, and suddenly, everyone understood. Number 9, With or Without You, U2, 1987. Bono has never fully explained who this song is about. He has given interviews, he has answered the question many times. He has spoken about the tension of public life against private relationships, about the impossibility of being fully present for someone when the world is constantly pulling you outward. But he has never said the name. With or Without You was built from a single guitar riff that the Edge had been carrying for months. Unable to finish it, unable to abandon it. The bass line that Adam Clayton laid underneath it gave the track its particular gravitational pull. The way it builds without ever quite exploding. The way it holds tension without releasing it. That tension was intentional. The song is not about love working. It is about love that doesn't work and cannot stop. Two people who are wrong for each other in ways they understand completely and cannot act on. The narrator cannot live with this person, cannot live without them. The song does not resolve because the situation never resolved. It reached number 1 in the United States, number 4 in the UK. It became the opening single from the Joshua Tree, the album that made U2 the biggest band in the world. Bono still performs it at every concert, every night, for nearly 4 decades. He still hasn't said the name, and maybe that silence is the most honest thing about it. Number 8, Jump, Van Halen, 1984. Eddie Van Halen wrote this keyboard riff in 1981. He played it for the band. David Lee Roth hated it. Not the riff itself, the instrument. Van Halen were a guitar band. A loud, dangerous, technically brilliant guitar band that had spent 5 years building a reputation on the back of Eddie's playing. Synthesizers were for other people. Softer people. People who couldn't do what they could do. Eddie kept the riff anyway, recorded it privately, waited. 3 years later, with the band fracturing under the weight of Roth's ego and Eddie's ambition pulling in opposite directions, Jump became the compromise that saved the album and destroyed the partnership. Roth agreed to sing it. Eddie agreed to front it with keyboards. Neither man fully believed in what the other was doing. But here's what nobody understood about Jump in 1984. The lyrics are not motivational. They are not an anthem of encouragement. Roth wrote them after watching a news broadcast in which a man stood on a ledge of a building while crowds gathered below. Someone in the crowd shouted "Jump." Roth took that image and inverted it, turned the darkness into momentum, took the worst possible human impulse, the crowd wanting the spectacle, and rebuilt it into something that sounded like pure forward. energy. Jump went to number 1 in the United States. It stayed there for 5 weeks. It became Van Halen's only number 1 single. Eddie never forgave Roth for how the album cycle ended. Roth left the band the following year. They spent the next decade in a public falling out that became one of rock's most exhausting feuds. The song that neither of them fully wanted became the only thing most people remember them for together. 3 years in a drawer. 5 weeks at number 1. 40 years of complicated feelings about a keyboard riff that changed everything. Number 7, Like a Prayer. Madonna, 1989. The Vatican condemned this song, not the album. Not Madonna's career generally. This specific song. The Pope issued a statement urging Catholics not to attend her Blonde Ambition tour. Pepsi pulled a $5 million sponsorship deal after airing the music video once. Several television networks refused to broadcast it. Most people assumed the controversy was about sex. It wasn't. Like a Prayer is about faith, specifically about the kind of faith that arrives in crisis, sudden, overwhelming, physical. Madonna has spoken about the song as a genuine expression of her Catholic upbringing, about the complicated relationship between desire and devotion, about the way religious experience and human longing can feel indistinguishable from each other at their most intense. The video showed burning crosses, a black saint coming to life, Madonna receiving stigmata, a gospel choir, images that pulled from genuine Catholic iconography and placed them in contexts that made the church deeply uncomfortable. But the song itself, stripped of the video, is a prayer, a real one, written by someone who grew up kneeling in a church and never fully left it regardless of how far she traveled from it. It reached number 1 in every major market. The album sold 15 million copies. The Pepsi deal collapse generated more publicity than the commercial would have. Madonna lost $5 million and became more famous than she had ever been. The Vatican never acknowledged the irony. Number 6, Don't You Forget About Me. Simple Minds, 1985. Simple Minds refused to record this song. Jim Kerr heard it and turned it down. The band had a clear artistic direction, atmospheric, expansive, European-influenced rock. This song felt like something else. Poppier, more direct, written specifically for a film soundtrack by songwriters outside the band. It wasn't theirs. John Hughes, the director of The Breakfast Club, had already approached Brian Ferry, then Billy Idol. Both passed. Simple Minds were not his first choice or his second. Kerr has given different versions of this story in different interviews. Some accounts say the band eventually warmed to it. Others suggest the label pressured them. What is consistent across every version is that Simple Minds did not walk eagerly into the studio to record Don't You Forget About Me. They walked in reluctantly, recorded it quickly, and moved on. The Breakfast Club was released in February 1985. The song reached number 1 in the United States. It became so completely identified with that film, that moment, that specific feeling of being 17 and misunderstood, that Simple Minds could not escape it for the rest of their career. Jim Kerr spent years in interviews being asked about a song he didn't write, didn't want to record, and didn't initially believe in. Here is the detail that reframes everything. The song's title comes from its final repeated line, a plea from 5 teenagers who spent one Saturday together and know that Monday morning will erase everything. Don't you forget about me. Don't. Simple Minds didn't write that plea, but they delivered it so completely that 40 years later, it still lands exactly where Hughes needed it to. Sometimes the song that isn't yours becomes the most honest thing you ever say. Number 5, Born in the USA, Bruce Springsteen, 1984. Ronald Reagan's campaign team called Springsteen's manager in September 1984. They wanted to use Born in the USA at campaign rallies. The president had mentioned the song in a speech, talked about its message of hope, its celebration of American pride, its embodiment of the optimistic spirit his administration represented.
Ronald Reagan, 4081 to 89.
Springsteen said no, because Born in the USA is not a patriotic song. It is not a celebration. It is not about pride. It is about a Vietnam veteran who comes home to nothing. No job, no respect, no acknowledgement of what he survived or what it cost him. The narrator was born in the USA, and that fact saved him from nothing and gave him nothing. The country that sent him to war had no use for him when the war was over. Springsteen has explained this in interviews so many times that the frustration is audible even in his most patient retellings. The musical production, massive, anthemic, the drums hitting like something triumphant, created a gap between sound and meaning that millions of people fell into and never climbed out of.
Once there was a land that was grand as...
Reagan's team heard the chorus and stopped listening. The album sold 15 million copies in the United States. Born in the USA became one of the most recognizable songs in American music history. Politicians across the ideological spectrum have attempted to use it at events. Springsteen or his management have responded every time. He wrote a song about a broken man in a broken system. The broken system adopted it as its theme tune, and no amount of explaining has ever fully corrected that. Number 4. Sweet Child of Mine, Guns N' Roses. 1988. Slash wrote this riff as a joke, not a demo, not a serious attempt at a song. He was warming up at rehearsal, running his fingers through a circular pattern that he described later as a goofy little thing. Something to stretch his hands before the real work started. The other members of the band were in the room. Nobody was paying particular attention. Then Axl Rose stopped. He had been sitting in the corner, writing in a notebook. Private words he had never intended anyone to hear. A poem he had written about his girlfriend, Erin Everly, the daughter of Don Everly of the Everly Brothers. The words were specific and vulnerable in a way that nothing Guns N' Roses had recorded before had been. He had written them for himself, for her. Not for an album, but the riff Slash was playing as a warm-up matched something in those words. Duff McKagan added bass. Steven Adler built a drum pattern around it. Izzy Stradlin found the chord structure underneath. The whole thing came together in a rehearsal room in an afternoon, a song that nobody had planned, built from a riff nobody took seriously, and words nobody was supposed to read. Sweet Child of Mine reached number 1 in the United States. It became Guns N' Roses' only American number 1 single. The guitar intro is one of the most recognized openings in rock history, played by beginners on their first week of lessons, covered by orchestras, sampled across genres. Here's what Slash said about it years later. He still finds the riff slightly embarrassing. Too pretty. Too neat. Too unlike everything else he considers his best work. Axl Rose and Erin Everly married in 1990. The marriage lasted less than a year. It ended in circumstances both described as painful. The song written for her outlasted everything. A warm-up exercise and a private poem. The most unlikely love song in hard rock history. And the one moment in Guns N' Roses' career where something completely unguarded made it onto tape before anyone could think better of it. Number 3. Every Breath You Take. The Police. 1983. Sting wrote this song in 20 minutes. He was staying at Goldeneye, Ian Fleming's estate in Jamaica, the same house where James Bond was invented, going through the collapse of his first marriage. The relationship was ending. The pain was real. And somewhere in that pain, a melody arrived that felt deceptively simple. 8 chords, a clean guitar line, a vocal that sat low and controlled, watching, always watching. Every Breath You Take spent 8 weeks at #1 in the United States. It became the best-selling single of 1983. For years, it was one of the most played songs in radio history. It became a staple at weddings, couples choosing it as their first dance song, their love song, the song that meant something permanent between them. Sting has spent 4 decades trying to correct this. The song is not a love song. He has said it directly, repeatedly, in interviews across multiple countries and multiple decades. The narrator is not devoted. He is obsessive, controlling. The watching is not romantic. It is threatening. Every breath you take, every move you make, every bond you break. This is surveillance. This is possession framed as tenderness. The musical production deceived everyone. The gentleness of the guitar, the restraint in the vocal, nothing in the sound told you what the words were actually saying. Sting has called it a nasty little song, a dark song. He wrote it about jealousy and control and the ugliest version of what love can become when it curdles into ownership. Couples still choose it for their first dance. He has stopped trying to stop them. Number 2, Livin' on a Prayer. Bon Jovi, 1986. This song almost didn't make the album. John Bon Jovi and Richie Sambora brought an early version to the label, and the response was lukewarm. The story, Tommy and Gina, 2 working-class kids holding their lives together on nothing, felt too specific, too unglamorous for a band being positioned as arena rock gods. The characters were waitresses and dock workers. The stakes were a monthly rent check. John Bon Jovi shelved it. Then producer Bruce Fairbairn heard the demo and pushed back. The specificity, he argued, was exactly the point. Tommy and Gina weren't rock stars. They were the audience. Every person sitting in an arena or listening in a car on the way to a job they didn't choose, they were Tommy and Gina. They weren't watching the story. They were living it. The song was rebuilt. The key change entering the chorus was raised dramatically. The moment the song lifts from verse into "Whoa, we're halfway there" became one of the most viscerally satisfying transitions in 1980s rock. Audiences didn't just sing along, they screamed it. The raising of the key mirrored the raising of stakes. Tommy and Gina were going to make it, and somehow, so were you. Livin' on a Prayer reached #1 in the United States. It became the signature song of Bon Jovi's career. John has said in interviews that he almost threw it away. Here is what nobody discusses about Tommy and Gina. They are not fictional. They are composites, built from real people John Bon Jovi knew growing up in New Jersey. Real relationships held together by real financial pressure. Real love tested by real circumstances that had nothing romantic about them. The song that almost got cut was the most real thing on the album, and the audience knew it before John Bon Jovi did. Number 1, Purple Rain. Prince, 1984. Prince wrote this song in one day. The film it was written for had a shooting schedule of 7 weeks, a budget that most Hollywood productions would consider embarrassingly small. A director who had never made a feature film, a lead actor, Prince himself, who had never carried a movie. Nobody believed Purple Rain would work. The studio had doubts. The label had doubts. The people closest to Prince had doubts. He was a genuine, musical genius. That was not in question. But genius in a recording studio does not automatically translate to a cinema screen. The history of musicians making films is largely a history of expensive and painful lessons. Prince didn't share the doubts. He wrote Purple Rain for the film's climactic scene, the moment where his character, a young musician carrying the weight of a violent and broken home, finally plays something true. Not for the crowd, not for the approval he had spent the entire film chasing, for himself, for his father, for every version of pain he had never found words for before. The song runs 8 minutes and 45 seconds. There is no editing it down. No radio-friendly version that captures what the full-length recording does. The guitar solo that arrives in the final 3 minutes is not technically the most complex thing Prince ever played. It is something rarer, completely emotionally honest. Every note is where it needs to be, and nowhere else. Purple Rain reached number 2 in the United States. The album spent 24 weeks at number 1. The film grossed $70 million against a budget of $7 million. Prince won the Academy Award for Best Original Song Score. But here's what gets me about this song every single time. Prince's father, John L. Nelson, was a musician who never made it. A man who carried his own talent and his own frustration, and sometimes directed both at the people closest to him. The relationship between Prince and his father was complicated in ways Prince rarely addressed directly. Purple Rain is addressed to his father. The Purple Rain is the place beyond this life, where everything painful becomes something else, where the weight of what you couldn't fix gets set down. Prince performed it at every major concert for the rest of his life. He died in April 2016. He was 57 years old. At his memorial, they played Purple Rain. And in arenas and living rooms and cars across the world, people who had heard the song 1,000 times finally understood what they had been listening to. These 12 songs were never what you thought they were. They were written in grief and fury and reluctant hotel rooms and rehearsal spaces where nobody was paying attention. They were misread by presidents and popes and millions of people singing along at weddings. They were shelved, rejected, almost deleted, and then released into a world that grabbed them and refused to let go. That is what the 1980s actually sounded like underneath the surface. Not the neon and the shoulder pads and the hair, but 12 people sitting alone with something true and deciding, for whatever reason, to say it out loud. Now, you know what they were saying.